At 0742 on March 6, 1945, a German Panther crew in the rubble-choked streets of Cologne spotted what they thought was another easy target. They had already destroyed 2 American Shermans that morning. 3 crewmen dead, 1 commander trying to crawl away with his left leg gone below the knee. The Panther was invincible. Its 75mm gun had been punching through American armor like paper for months. But this time, something was different. The tank emerging from the side street looked wrong. Too low, too angular, almost German. The Panther commander hesitated for exactly half a second. That hesitation cost him everything. Because the man behind the gun of that mysterious American tank was Clarence Smoyer, a 21-year-old kid from Pennsylvania coal country who had never been in a fistfight, who had hunted exactly once for rabbit and felt sick afterward. Within 45 seconds, Smoyer would destroy Germany's most feared tank and change how America understood armored warfare forever. By March 1945, the United States Army had a catastrophic problem that military leadership refused to acknowledge publicly. American tank crews were dying at horrifying rates. The M4 Sherman, the backbone of American armored forces, was being systematically slaughtered by German Panthers and Tigers across every battlefield in Europe. The statistics were devastating. During the Battle of the Bulge 3 months earlier, entire tank companies lost half their vehicles in single engagements. Some battalions reported casualty rates exceeding 70%. The Sherman weighed 33 tons. The Panther weighed 45 tons. The Tiger weighed even more. German 75mm and 88mm guns could penetrate Sherman armor at ranges where American 75mm rounds simply bounced off German steel. Crews called the Sherman the Ronson, after the cigarette lighter, because it lit up first time, every time. If your Sherman got hit, you had seconds to escape before ammunition cooked off and turned your tank into a crematorium. The problem had been obvious since Normandy. Reports flooded back from France describing Sherman after Sherman burning, while German tanks drove through American positions untouched. Tank commanders begged for better equipment. They wrote letters home telling families to pressure Congress. They died waiting for answers that never came. Army Ground Forces Command, led by Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, insisted the Sherman was adequate. Tank destroyers would handle enemy armor, they claimed. American doctrine said tanks supported infantry and avoided tank versus tank combat. German doctrine said otherwise. So did battlefield reality. The Ordnance Department had actually designed a heavy tank back in 1942. The T-26 program produced multiple prototypes. Each iteration added armor, improved the gun, refined the suspension. Each iteration also added weight and complexity. McNair's staff rejected every single proposal. The Sherman worked fine in North Africa, they argued. Why fix what was not broken? By 1944, that argument was killing American tankers by the hundreds. Clarence Smoyer grew up in Lehighton, Pennsylvania, deep in coal country where his father worked the mines. He was quiet, unremarkable, the kind of kid teachers forgot existed 2 weeks after graduation. He joined the Army because everyone was joining the Army. He ended up in tanks because the Army needed tank crews. There was nothing special about Clarence Smoyer. Nothing that suggested he would become one of the most skilled gunners in the European theater. But war has a way of revealing what peacetime conceals. Smoyer discovered he had a gift. His hands were steady. His eyes were sharp. His mind could calculate angles and distances faster than he could explain. By March 1945, he had been in combat for 7 months across France and Germany. 5 enemy tanks destroyed. His crew had survived engagements that killed men and vehicles on either side of them. They trusted each other completely. Staff Sergeant Robert Early commanded from the turret. Corporal John DeRiggi loaded the 90mm rounds. Private Homer Davis assisted on the bow machine gun. Private William McVeigh drove. They had fought together since September 1944, first in a Sherman through Normandy hedgerows and Ardennes snowdrifts. 3 weeks before Cologne, they received something different, something that would change everything. The Army called it the T-26E3. Later, it would be designated M26 Pershing. The crew called it Eagle 7, after the Philadelphia Eagles. It was the most powerful tank America had ever built, and almost nobody knew it existed. The M26 Pershing was the answer to a question the Army had been asking since 1942 and ignoring since 1943. How do you kill a Panther? The Sherman could not do it from the front. Its 75mm gun lacked the velocity to penetrate German frontal armor at combat ranges. Tank crews learned to aim for side armor, for tracks, for any weakness they could find. Most of the time, they died before they found one. The Pershing changed the equation completely. Its 90mm gun could penetrate any German tank at any combat range. Period. The muzzle velocity was higher. The round was heavier. The physics were simply different. Where a Sherman round would bounce, a Pershing round would punch straight through. The armor was equally impressive. 4 inches of frontal protection, double what the Sherman offered. A Panther's 75mm gun that could kill a Sherman at 1,000 yards would struggle against Pershing frontal armor at half that distance. The tank weighed 46 tons, heavier than the Panther itself. The engine was more powerful. The suspension was more sophisticated. This was not an upgraded Sherman. This was an entirely new category of American armored vehicle. But the Army brass called it unnecessary. They called it too heavy for European bridges. They called it a logistics nightmare. They called it a solution to a problem that did not exist. Meanwhile, American tankers burned alive in their Shermans, waiting for help that never came. The Battle of the Bulge finally broke the bureaucratic resistance. 400 German tanks, including Panthers and Tiger IIs, smashed into American lines in December 1944. Sherman crews fought bravely and died quickly. After the Ardennes, nobody could pretend the Sherman was sufficient anymore. In January 1945, the first 20 T-26E3 tanks arrived at the Belgian port of Antwerp. 20 tanks, that was all. 20 against hundreds of Panthers and Tigers still operational across Germany. The tanks reached a maintenance facility near Aachen, Germany, on February 17th. Division commanders sent their best crews for training. The Pershing had a different transmission than the Sherman, but similar controls. Each crew fired 28 rounds to familiarize themselves with the 90mm main gun. Smoyer remembered his first test fire vividly. A farmhouse stood 1,200 yards downrange. Major General Maurice Rose, commander of the 3rd Armored Division, stood 20 feet behind the tank with his staff. Rose had ordered the target specifically, the farmhouse chimney. Smoyer centered the reticle and pulled the trigger. The muzzle blast knocked Rose and every officer near him flat on their backs. The chimney exploded into fragments. Rose stood up, brushed dirt off his uniform, and grinned. Smoyer hit 2 more chimneys at longer ranges. Rose approved the Pershing for combat immediately. The flash was bigger than anything they had experienced. The recoil was harder. The noise made your ears ring even through the intercom headset. But the power was undeniable. This gun could kill anything the Germans had. The crews knew it. Rose knew it. The question was whether they would get the chance to prove it before the war ended. The first Pershings entered combat on February 25th near the Roer River. The results were immediate and devastating. One Pershing was knocked out the next day by a hidden Tiger, proving the tank was not invincible. But others killed German tanks at ranges where Shermans would have been completely helpless. A Panther that would have required 5 Shermans to flank and destroy could be killed by a single Pershing in a head-to-head engagement. The psychological impact was equally significant. German tank crews had grown accustomed to dominance. They expected American tanks to run or die. Now they faced something different, something that could hurt them. Reports from German units described confusion when encountering the new American tanks. The silhouette was unfamiliar. The gun was clearly larger than Sherman guns. Some German commanders initially reported American units had captured German equipment. The Pershing looked more German than American. By early March, the 3rd Armored Division was pushing toward the Rhine. Cologne sat on the western bank, a major industrial city, Germany's 4th largest, now a wasteland of rubble and smoke. 262 Allied bombing raids had reduced most of the city to broken stone and twisted steel. Only the twin spires of Cologne Cathedral still stood, rising above the destruction like tombstones. Somewhere in that ruined city, German Panther crews waited in ambush positions. They had destroyed Shermans there for weeks. They expected to destroy more. On the morning of March 6th, Smoyer's crew received their orders. They would lead the advance into Cologne city center. Their Pershing, one of only 20 in all of Europe, would be first through every intersection, first to draw fire from every hidden anti-tank gun. Rose himself had chosen them for the mission. It was supposed to be an honor. Smoyer touched the small Bible in his breast pocket and watched the streets ahead narrow into shadows. 2 Sherman tanks from F Company had attempted to reach the cathedral from the north. The radio erupted with frantic transmissions at 0947. F Company Sherman hit. Crew bailing out. 2nd Sherman taking fire. German tank position unknown, but close to the cathedral. All units advised Panther operating in cathedral vicinity. The Panther had already killed at least 3 American tankers. The crew that destroyed those Shermans was professional, precise, deadly. Their position covered the entire cathedral square. Any American tank approaching from the north would be destroyed before it could return fire. Eagle 7 was the only American tank in position to engage. The mission had not changed. Eliminate enemy armor. Smoyer felt his mouth go dry. The Pershing had never faced a Panther in direct combat. Every crewman knew what that meant. They were about to find out whether the tank was everything the Army promised, or whether they would die like all the Sherman crews before them. But the engagement that followed would last only 45 seconds. 45 seconds that a Signal Corps cameraman named Jim Bates captured on film. 45 seconds that would appear in American newsreels within weeks. 45 seconds that proved the Pershing was everything American tankers had been dying for since Normandy. And 45 seconds that would haunt Clarence Smoyer for the next 68 years. Because something else happened in Cologne that morning. Something the newsreels did not show. Something that would connect a Pennsylvania coal miner's son with a German grocery clerk named Katharina Esser, in a tragedy neither could have imagined. In Part 2, we will witness the cathedral duel itself, shot by shot, second by second. We will see why the German Panther commander hesitated at the worst possible moment. We will watch the Pershing prove its worth in the most dramatic tank engagement ever filmed. And we will discover the secret that Smoyer carried for nearly 7 decades, a secret that would eventually bring him back to Cologne as an old man seeking forgiveness from ghosts. In Part 1, we met Clarence Smoyer, a quiet kid from Pennsylvania coal country, who became one of America's deadliest tank gunners. We watched as the U.S. Army finally delivered the weapon American tankers had been dying for since Normandy, the M26 Pershing, a tank that could kill Panthers and Tigers at ranges where Shermans would have been helpless. 20 of these machines arrived in Europe in January 1945. Just 20 against hundreds of German tanks still operational. Smoyer's crew received one of them. They named it Eagle 7. On March 6, 1945, they rolled into the burning ruins of Cologne with orders to eliminate enemy armor near the cathedral. 2 Shermans had already been destroyed that morning. 3 American tankers dead. 1 trying to crawl away with his leg blown off. Somewhere in the rubble, a German Panther crew waited. They had been killing Americans all week. They expected to kill more. But they had never faced a Pershing before, and they had no idea what was coming. Eagle 7 approached the cathedral district at 0930. The streets narrowed into canyons of broken masonry. Buildings that still stood rose 4 and 5 stories high, blocking sunlight, creating shadows where anything could hide. Smoyer kept his eye pressed to the gun sight. His right hand rested on the turret traverse control. His left hand hovered near the trigger. The 90mm gun was loaded with armor piercing. Through his periscope, he could see the twin spires of Cologne Cathedral rising above the destruction. 516 feet of Gothic stone that had somehow survived 262 Allied bombing raids. The cathedral was the only landmark left in the city. Every map reference started from those spires. Every radio transmission mentioned them. And somewhere near those spires, a panther was hunting. Staff Sergeant Early made a decision at 0945. He would reconnoiter on foot. Leaving the Pershing exposed was dangerous. Advancing blind into an ambush was worse. He needed to see the German tank's position before committing Eagle 7 to the attack. He climbed out of the turret hatch and dropped to the street. An American soldier appeared from a doorway 30 yards ahead. Technical Sergeant Jim Bates, Army Signal Corps. He carried a 16mm film camera and wore a rucksack loaded with film magazines. Bates had been documenting the 3rd Armored Division since Normandy. His footage appeared in newsreels shown in American movie theaters. He had filmed the Panther destroying the 2 Shermans that morning. He had clear footage of the German tank's muzzle flash, the impact on American armor, the crew trying to escape. Now he wanted more. The presence of an American heavy tank in Cologne was newsworthy. A battle between the Pershing and a Panther would be extraordinary. Early and Bates moved forward together, staying close to building walls. They reached a corner where they could observe the cathedral square. Early scanned the plaza methodically. The disabled Sherman sat in the middle of the street, smoke pouring from its hatches. Beyond it, partially concealed by a side street, he spotted the Panther. The German tank sat in perfect ambush position. Its 75mm gun pointed down the avenue where the Shermans had approached. The barrel extended from the angular turret like a finger pointing at the kill zone. The crew had chosen their position carefully. They could cover the entire square while remaining partially hidden. Any American tank entering from the north would expose its vulnerable side armor before it could return fire. Early studied the geometry for 30 seconds. The Panther could not see Eagle 7's current position. A building blocked their line of sight. But there was another option. A side street ran parallel to their avenue. If the Pershing could loop around the block, they might approach from the west. The Panther's gun faced north. Its turret would need to rotate to engage a threat from the west. Turret rotation took time, Not much, perhaps 3 or 4 seconds, but enough. Enough for one shot. Early returned to Eagle 7 and explained the plan through the intercom. They would advance down the parallel street. At the intersection closest to the cathedral, they would turn left and enter the square. The Panther would be to their right, roughly 90 degrees from Eagle 7's gun. Smoyer would have a clear shot at the German tank's side armor, the thinnest armor, the killing shot. McVeigh acknowledged. Derigi loaded an armor-piercing round. Smoyer rotated the turret until the main gun pointed right, anticipating the angle they would need. Bates positioned himself in a second-story window overlooking the cathedral square. His camera was ready. Eagle 7 entered the side street at 0958. The avenue was narrower than the main approach, barely wide enough for the Pershing's bulk. McVeigh navigated around a crater, keeping the tank moving at steady speed. Too slow, and they would be an easy target. Too fast, and Smoyer could not aim properly. 50 yards from the intersection. 40. 30. McVeigh maintained speed. The engine noise would alert the Panther crew. The Germans would hear the Pershing before they saw it. But sound took time to locate. Direction was difficult to determine in the echoing streets. 20 yards. The Pershing's bow emerged from the side street. McVeigh's periscope gave him a limited view to the right. He saw the Panther immediately. The German tank sat exactly where Early had described, perhaps 110 yards away. Point-blank range for a 90mm gun. But the Panther's turret was moving. The long gun barrel was rotating toward them. Someone in the German tank had spotted the Pershing faster than expected. McVeigh made a split-second decision. He did not stop. Stopping would make Eagle 7 stationary. A stationary tank was a dead tank. He gunned the throttle instead. The Pershing lurched forward into the intersection, crossing the German tank's line of fire. Smoyer saw the Panther appear in his gun sight. The angular turret, the long gun, the dark muzzle swinging toward him. Every instinct screamed that he was looking directly down the barrel of a 75mm cannon that could penetrate his armor at this range. Training took over. He did not wait for the Pershing to stop. American tanks rarely fired on the move. The gun was not stabilized. Accuracy dropped significantly when the vehicle was moving. But stopping meant dying. He compensated for the motion, led the target slightly, squeezed the trigger. The 90mm gun fired at 0959 in 12 seconds. The armor-piercing round crossed 110 yards of open space in a fraction of a second. It struck the Panther's turret face just below the gun mantlet. Sparks erupted from the point of contact. Metal fragments spalled off the interior surface, turning into shrapnel inside the crew compartment. Inside the Panther, Oberleutnant Wilhelm Bartelborth tried to process what he was seeing. The tank that had appeared in the intersection was too low and angular to be a Sherman. It looked almost German. He hesitated. Was it friendly? That hesitation lasted perhaps half a second. Then the impact came. McVeigh brought the Pershing to a stop in the middle of the intersection. Fully exposed. No cover. But stationary meant Smoyer could aim properly. Derigi already had another round in his hands. The breech was open. He slammed the round home and locked it. Smoyer had not taken his eye from the sight. The first shot hit high. Good hit, but not catastrophic. The Panther was still operational. He adjusted his aim point lower, targeting the hull side just below the turret ring. The Panther's side armor was thinner than the front. 40mm instead of 80. The 90mm gun could penetrate 40mm easily. He fired again at 0959 and 17 seconds. The second round struck the Panther's right side. It penetrated the armor plate and continued through the crew compartment. The projectile exited through the left side armor, leaving 2 holes the size of dinner plates. Inside the tank, systems failed. Hydraulics ruptured. Ammunition ignited. Bartelborth threw open his hatch and jumped. He landed on the street behind the Panther, away from the Pershing. 3 other crewmen followed, scrambling out as smoke poured from the engine compartment. 1 man did not make it out. Smoyer fired a 3rd time at 09:59 and 23 seconds. The round struck low on the turret. Fire erupted. Flames spread quickly, fed by leaking fuel and burning hydraulic fluid. Within seconds, the entire Panther was engulfed. In the second-story window, Jim Bates kept his camera running. He had captured everything. 45 seconds from first shot to the Panther burning. The film showed the Pershing entering the intersection, the German gun rotating, the muzzle flashes, the impacts, the crew bailing out. Smoyer sat back from the gun sight. His hands were shaking. The Panther was destroyed. Eagle 7 was intact. Everyone in the crew was alive. The Pershing had proven itself in the most dramatic tank engagement ever filmed. The cathedral duel was over. But the battle for Cologne was not finished. German units still held portions of the city east of the cathedral. Isolated strongpoints needed elimination. Eagle 7 received orders to continue the advance. The crew remounted. McVeigh started the engine. The Pershing rolled deeper into the ruined city. At 14:32, Eagle 7 entered a narrow street several blocks from the cathedral. Buildings rose on both sides, creating a corridor barely wider than the tank itself. Ahead, the street opened into a small intersection. A black automobile appeared suddenly from a side street, racing across the intersection. Moving at high speed, weaving between debris. To Smoyer, it looked like a staff car. German officers used similar vehicles. In urban combat, any unidentified vehicle was a potential threat. Civilians had been evacuated weeks ago. Anyone still in Cologne was either a combatant or supporting the German war effort. Smoyer opened fire with a coaxial machine gun. Tracer rounds streaked across the intersection. Several hit the car's body panels. Glass shattered. The vehicle jerked. At the same moment, from a concealed position to the left, a German Panzer IV fired its machine gun at the same car. The tank sat hidden behind a partially collapsed building. Its crew had also spotted the automobile. The combined fire from both tanks shredded the vehicle. The car stopped. The driver slumped over the wheel. A passenger door opened. A figure fell onto the cobblestones and did not move. Smoyer saw the muzzle flash from the German tank. A Panzer IV, older model, not as dangerous as the Panther, but its position was good. It had cover. Eagle 7 sat exposed. The German tank began to withdraw, backing deeper behind the collapsed building. Smoyer could see only the front portion of the hull, not enough for a killing shot. The Panzer disappeared behind the rubble. McVeigh tried to maneuver for a better angle, but the narrow street limited movement. Smoyer made a decision. He could not see the German tank, but he could see the building. He rotated the turret until the 90mm gun pointed at the base of the standing wall section. The high-explosive round in the breech was designed for exactly this situation. He aimed for the corner support, where structural integrity was weakest. The gun fired. The explosion removed a section of the corner support approximately 6 feet wide. For a moment, nothing happened. Then physics took over. 4 stories of masonry and wooden beams collapsed inward. The building fell onto itself. Tons of rubble crashed down, filling the space where the Panzer IV had been. Dust clouds billowed outward. When they cleared, the building was gone. A mountain of broken stone and twisted metal sat in its place. Somewhere beneath that pile, the German tank was buried. Its crew clawed their way out through the turret hatch. They escaped. They would surrender to American forces by nightfall. The Panther burned for 3 hours. Ammunition cooked off inside the hull. By noon, only a blackened shell remained. Bates's footage reached newsreel editors within a week. American movie theaters showed the cathedral duel by late March. Smoyer's sister saw it in Pennsylvania. She recognized her brother. She brought their parents to the next screening. The Pershing had proven everything the Army promised. It could kill Panthers. It could survive hits that would destroy Shermans. It changed the equation of armored warfare overnight. But Smoyer could not stop thinking about the black automobile, the figure that fell from the passenger door, the way the body lay still on the cobblestones. He did not know who was in that car. He did not know if his bullets had killed them or if the German tank's fire had been responsible. He knew only that someone was dead, and he had pulled the trigger. In Part 3, we will follow the 3rd Armored Division's final push into Germany. We will witness the death of Major General Maurice Rose, the highest-ranking American officer killed by enemy fire in the European theater. We will see how the war ended for Smoyer and his crew, and we will discover the identity of the woman in the black car. A secret that would haunt Clarence Smoyer for 68 years. A secret that would eventually bring him back to Cologne as an old man, seeking forgiveness from ghosts. In Part 1, we met Clarence Smoyer, a quiet kid from Pennsylvania coal country who became one of America's deadliest tank gunners. We watched as the Army finally delivered the M26 Pershing, the weapon American tankers had been dying for since Normandy. In Part 2, we witnessed the cathedral duel, 45 seconds that changed armored warfare forever. Smoyer destroyed a German Panther in the most dramatic tank engagement ever filmed. But something else happened that day. A black automobile racing across an intersection, machine gun fire from 2 tanks, a figure falling from the passenger door onto the cobblestones. Smoyer did not know who died in that car. He did not know whose bullets killed them. He knew only that he had pulled the trigger. The Pershing had proven itself against German armor. But the war was not over. The 3rd Armored Division was pushing deeper into Germany, and the hardest fighting was still ahead. The fall of Cologne sent shockwaves through German command. The city had been Germany's 4th largest. Its capture meant Allied forces now controlled the entire western bank of the Rhine. But the real shock was not territorial. It was tactical. Reports flooded into Wehrmacht headquarters describing a new American tank, something that did not match any known Allied vehicle. The silhouette was wrong, too low, too angular, almost German in appearance. Panther crews who had dominated every engagement since Normandy were suddenly vulnerable. The tank that destroyed Bartelborth's Panther in the Cathedral Square had done so in less than a minute. 3 shots, 3 hits, complete destruction. German intelligence scrambled to identify the threat. They knew Americans had been developing heavy tanks. They had dismissed the reports. American industry could not produce heavy tanks fast enough to matter, they believed. American logistics could not support vehicles that heavy in European terrain, they assumed. They were wrong. By mid-March, every German tank commander operating west of the Rhine had received new orders. Avoid engagement with unidentified American armor. Report sightings immediately. Withdraw rather than risk destruction. The psychological impact was devastating. German tank crews, who had grown accustomed to superiority, now hesitated before every engagement. Was that a Sherman ahead? Or something else? Something that could kill them before they could respond? The hesitation cost lives. German tanks that would have attacked aggressively now held back. Positions that would have been defended fiercely were abandoned. The Pershing had changed the mathematics of armored warfare overnight. But the war continued regardless. The 3rd Armored Division did not rest after Cologne. By March 10th, they were advancing east beyond the Rhine, pushing deeper into the German heartland. Resistance varied wildly. Some towns surrendered without a single shot fired. White sheets hung from windows. Civilians stood in doorways with their hands raised. Other locations required house-to-house clearance that cost American lives. The Wehrmacht was disintegrating as an organized fighting force, but isolated units continued following orders. Fanatics and SS troops fought to the death rather than surrender. Hitler Youth members, some as young as 14, threw themselves at American tanks with Panzerfausts. The killing did not stop just because victory was certain. Smoyer's crew continued operations through March. Eagle 7 led advances, provided fire support, eliminated strongpoints. The Pershing performed flawlessly. Its 90mm gun destroyed everything the Germans put in front of it. Its armor deflected rounds that would have killed Sherman crews. But Smoyer could not stop thinking about the black automobile. The image appeared in quiet moments, when the fighting paused, when darkness fell. The car racing across the intersection, the tracer streaking toward it, the figure falling. He did not know if his bullets had killed that person. The German Panzer IV had fired at the same moment. Both tanks hit the car. Both crews shared responsibility. But shared responsibility was still responsibility. The weight of that moment grew heavier with each passing day. On March 30th, 1945, the 3rd Armored Division suffered its greatest loss. Major General Maurice Rose was riding at the front of a column south of Paderborn. His command style had never changed throughout the entire war. He led from forward positions. He refused to direct operations from rear headquarters. He took the same risks he asked of his men. At approximately 1800 hours, his jeep encountered a German tank unit that had broken through American lines. Tiger tanks blocked the road ahead. Rose's driver attempted to evade. A Tiger commander cut them off. The German soldier emerged from his turret hatch and pointed a machine pistol at the jeep. Rose reached toward his holster, either to surrender his weapon or to resist. The German fired. Rose was hit multiple times. He died instantly. He was the highest-ranking American officer killed by enemy fire in the entire European theater. His body was recovered the next day by elements of the 3rd Armored Division. Smoyer's unit participated in the recovery operation. Rose's death hit the division hard. Soldiers who had served under him since North Africa struggled with the loss. He had been demanding, but fair. He had never asked his men to do anything he would not do himself. His funeral was held at the Netherlands American Cemetery in Margraten. Thousands attended. The man who had approved the Pershing for combat after watching Smoyer destroy those farmhouse chimneys was gone. The war that had killed so many would soon end, but it had one more month of killing left. April 1945 became a blur of advances and surrenders, and occasional fierce resistance. The 3rd Armored pushed east through increasingly disorganized German defenses. Towns fell daily. Prisoners surrendered by the thousands. The Wehrmacht had ceased to exist as a coherent fighting force. Individual units still fought. SS formations still resisted. But the outcome was no longer in question. Eagle 7 participated in dozens of engagements during that final month. Each one followed a similar pattern. American forces would approach a German position. The Pershing would advance to draw fire and identify enemy armor. If Panthers or Tigers appeared, Smoyer would engage and destroy them. If only infantry defended, the 90mm gun would eliminate bunkers and fortifications, while Shermans and infantry completed the assault. The statistics told the story. Before the Pershing arrived, American tank battalions attacking fortified German positions suffered casualty rates exceeding 30%. With Pershing support, those rates dropped to single digits. A single heavy tank could change the outcome of engagements that would have cost dozens of lives. The mathematics had shifted. American armor was no longer inferior. On April 11th, the 3rd Armored Division liberated the Dora-Mittelbau concentration camp complex near Nordhausen. What they found there defied description. Thousands of corpses, survivors who looked more dead than alive. Underground factories where slave laborers had built V-2 rockets under conditions designed to kill them. Smoyer and his crew saw the camp. Every soldier in the division saw it. The images burned into memory alongside the burning Panther and the falling figure from the black automobile. War accumulated such images. They piled up inside a man until he could barely breathe under their weight. On May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. May 8th was declared Victory in Europe Day. The killing finally stopped. Smoyer remained in Germany through the summer as part of the occupation force. Eagle 7 was eventually shipped back to the United States for analysis. The Ordnance Department wanted to study the Pershing's combat performance in detail. Engineers documented every scratch and dent on the armor. Ballistic experts measured gun barrel wear. Maintenance crews noted mechanical issues. The data would inform the next generation of American tank design. By September 1945, Smoyer received orders to return home. He sailed from Bremerhaven to New York aboard a troop transport. The voyage took 8 days. He arrived at Fort Dix, New Jersey for processing. Within a week, he held his discharge papers. Corporal Clarence Smoyer, United States Army, service number 33490086, was released from active duty on September 24, 1945. He returned to Laheyton, Pennsylvania, to familiar streets, to people who remembered him as the quiet kid who never wanted to fight. The war was over. The Pershing had proven everything the Army promised and more. American tankers who had died waiting for heavy tanks were finally vindicated. The bureaucratic resistance that had killed hundreds was exposed as the deadly mistake it had always been. Jim Bates's footage of the Cathedral duel appeared in newsreels across America. Movie audiences watched Smoyer destroy the Panther without knowing his name. They saw the muzzle flashes, the impacts, the German crew bailing out, the tank burning. They cheered. They did not see what came after. The black automobile, the machine gun fire, the figure on the cobblestones. Smoyer found work at a cement plant after returning home. He married Melba Whitehead in 1946. They had 3 children. He rarely spoke about the war. When people asked about his service, he changed the subject. When they pressed for details, he walked away. The memories were too heavy to share. The Panther burning in the cathedral square, the concentration camp at Nordhausen, General Rose lying dead on a German road, and always, always the black automobile, the figure falling, the stillness on the cobblestones. He did not know who died that day. He told himself it might have been a German officer, a military target, someone who deserved to die. But he did not believe it. Something about the way the figure fell, Something about the way the body lay still. It looked like a civilian. It looked like someone who had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong moment, caught between two armies in a war that had already killed millions. Smoyer carried that weight for decades. It never got lighter. The Pershing had changed armored warfare. It had saved countless American lives. It had proven that American industry could build tanks capable of defeating anything the Germans produced. But none of that erased the memory of the black automobile. In Part 4, we will follow Clarence Smoyer through the next 68 years. We will watch as the quiet kid from coal country builds a life while carrying the weight of war. We will see how a chance encounter with Jim Bates footage in 1996 confirmed his worst fears about the black automobile. We will witness his return to Cologne in 2013, where he met the man who had been his enemy that day. Gustav Schaefer, the German gunner whose Panzer IV had also fired at the car. Two old men who had tried to kill each other, standing together at the grave of the woman caught between them. Katharina Esser, 26 years old, the youngest of 4 sisters. And we will discover how forgiveness found them both in the shadow of the cathedral where everything began. In Part 1, we met Clarence Smoyer, a quiet kid from Pennsylvania coal country who never wanted to fight. We watched as the U.S. Army finally delivered the M26 Pershing, the tank American tankers had been dying for since Normandy. In Part 2, we witnessed the cathedral duel, 45 seconds that changed armored warfare forever. Smoyer destroyed a German Panther in the most dramatic tank engagement ever filmed. But something else happened that day. A black automobile, machine gun fire, a figure falling onto the cobblestones. In Part 3, we followed the 3rd Armored Division's final push into Germany. We saw the death of Major General Maurice Rose. We watched the war end and Smoyer return home, carrying memories he could not share. But this story has one more chapter, a chapter that spans 68 years, a chapter about guilt and forgiveness, and 2 old men who tried to kill each other, standing together at a grave. Because some wars never end when the shooting stops. Clarence Smoyer came home to Lehighton, Pennsylvania in September 1945. He was 21 years old. He had spent 7 months in combat. He had destroyed multiple German tanks, including the Panther in Cologne Cathedral Square. He had survived engagements that killed men on either side of him. He had seen concentration camps. He had seen his commanding general shot dead on a German road. He had seen things no 21-year-old should ever see, and he told almost no one about any of it. He found work at a cement plant, physical labor, honest work, the kind of job where you could lose yourself in the routine and not think about the past. He married Melba Whitehead in 1946. She was patient with his silences. She understood that some questions should not be asked. They had 3 children together, a family, a normal life, the kind of life millions of veterans were building across America in those post-war years. But normal did not mean peaceful. The nightmares came regularly. Smoyer would wake up swinging his fists at enemies only he could see. The images were vivid. The Panther burning, the concentration camp, General Rose lying dead, and always the black automobile, the figure falling, the stillness on the cobblestones. Decades passed. The cement plant became a career. The children grew up. Smoyer never talked about the war. When people asked about his service, he changed the subject. When they pressed for details, he walked away. The memories were too heavy to share. His son Barry struggled with addiction. In the 1970s, Barry died of a heroin overdose. A father should never bury his child. Smoyer buried his. The weight of that loss added to all the other weights he carried. Melba developed Alzheimer's disease as the years continued. The woman who had been his anchor for 7 decades began to forget. She forgot their children's names. She forgot their wedding day. Eventually, she forgot Smoyer himself. She passed away in 2017 after 71 years of marriage. The people who had anchored Smoyer's civilian life were gone, but the war remained. The M26 Pershing's legacy extended far beyond Cologne. Only 20 of these tanks reached Europe before the German surrender, but their impact shaped American armored doctrine for the next 50 years. The lessons learned from Pershing combat informed the development of every subsequent American main battle tank. The M26 Patton, which served in Korea, was essentially an upgraded Pershing with a more powerful engine. The M47 and M48 Pattons that followed carried the same design philosophy: heavier armor, bigger guns, the willingness to sacrifice mobility for protection and firepower. The bureaucratic resistance that had delayed the Pershing became a cautionary tale studied in military academies. How many American tankers died because leadership insisted the Sherman was adequate? The exact number is impossible to calculate, but historians estimate that earlier deployment of heavy tanks could have saved hundreds of lives during the Battle of the Bulge alone. The Pershing proved that American industry could build tanks capable of defeating anything the Germans produced. It proved that American crews could master sophisticated equipment under combat conditions. It proved that the doctrine of avoiding tank versus tank combat was fatally flawed. Panthers and Tigers would not politely avoid American armor just because American doctrine said tanks should support infantry. The mathematics of armored warfare required tanks that could fight and win against enemy armor. The Pershing delivered that capability. Too late for many, but not too late to matter. The 90mm gun that Smoyer used to destroy the Panther became the standard American tank armament for the next decade. Its successor, the 105mm gun, armed American tanks through Vietnam and beyond. The design principles that made the Pershing effective, the balance of firepower, protection, and mobility, remain relevant today. Modern American tanks, like the M1 Abrams, are infinitely more sophisticated, but they follow the same fundamental philosophy: hit hard, survive hits, win the fight. The story of the Pershing carries lessons that extend beyond military history. It is a story about innovation and resistance to innovation, about bureaucracies that prefer familiar failures to unfamiliar successes, about the cost of ignoring problems because solving them requires admitting mistakes. Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, who led the resistance to heavy tank development, died in Normandy in July 1944. He was killed by friendly fire during a bombing raid. He never saw the Battle of the Bulge. He never saw American tankers dying in Shermans that could not compete with German armor. He never saw the Pershing prove everything his staff had denied. The men who continued his policies after his death eventually admitted their error. But admissions came after hundreds of tankers had burned alive, waiting for equipment that already existed in prototype form. This pattern repeats throughout military history. The machine gun was dismissed as impractical before World War I. Aircraft carriers were considered inferior to battleships before Pearl Harbor. Drones were dismissed as toys before they revolutionized modern warfare. Institutions resist change. Bureaucracies protect existing investments. Leaders who built their careers on current technology resist replacements that might make their expertise obsolete. The cost of this resistance is measured in lives. The Pershing story is not unique. It is a template, a warning. A reminder that the next war will not be fought with the weapons of the last war, and that somewhere, right now, someone is proposing an innovation that experts are calling impossible, impractical, or unnecessary. History suggests they might be wrong. In 1996, at age 73, Clarence Smoyer saw Jim Bates's footage for the first time. A documentary about the 3rd Armored Division included the Cathedral Duel. Smoyer watched himself destroy the Panther. He watched the crew bail out. He watched the tank burn. But the footage also showed something else. Something Smoyer had never seen clearly during the battle itself. The black automobile. The machine gun fire. The passenger falling from the car. A woman. Young. Dead. The image confirmed what Smoyer had feared for 50 years. He had killed a civilian. The knowledge was crushing, but it also created a need for resolution. He wanted to know who she was. He wanted to apologize to her family. He wanted forgiveness, though he did not believe he deserved it. In 2013, at age 89, Smoyer returned to Cologne. A German journalist had researched the incident and identified the victim, Katharina Esser, 26 years old, the youngest of 4 sisters. She had cared for her elderly parents while her sisters married and started families. She worked as a clerk in a grocery store. She took night classes in home economics. On March 6, 1945, she and her boss had attempted to escape the city in his car. They were caught between American and German guns. Both died. The journalist arranged a meeting at Esser's grave. Smoyer arrived expecting to be alone with his guilt. Instead, he found Gustav Schaefer waiting for him, the German machine gunner whose Panzer IV had also fired at the car. The man Smoyer had buried under a collapsed building moments later. Both men were 89 years old. Both had carried the same memory for 68 years. Both believed they had killed Katharina Esser. They met on the cathedral steps. Smoyer extended his hand. Schaefer took it. They walked together to the mass grave where Esser was buried alongside other civilian casualties of the battle. Neither man knew whose bullets had killed her. Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. The chaos of urban combat made certainty impossible. What mattered was that they had both fired. They shared responsibility. They shared guilt. Schaefer placed yellow roses on the grave. Smoyer knelt to do the same and lost his balance. Schaefer caught him before he fell. 2 old men who had tried to kill each other 68 years earlier now held each other up at the grave of the woman caught between them. They became friends in the years that followed. Letters crossed the Atlantic. Video calls connected Pennsylvania and Germany. They discussed the war not as enemies, but as men who had survived it and were trying to understand it. Schaefer died in 2017. Smoyer sent flowers to the funeral with a note. "I will never forget you. Your brother in arms, Clarence." On September 18, 2019, Clarence Smoyer received the Bronze Star for Valor at a ceremony in Washington. He was 95 years old. The last surviving member of Eagle 7's crew. The other crew members received their medals posthumously. Their families accepted on their behalf. 74 years after the Cathedral Duel, the Army finally recognized what Smoyer and his crew had accomplished. Clarence Smoyer died on September 30, 2022, at his home in Allentown, Pennsylvania. He was 99 years old. The Panther he destroyed still appears in photographs, burning in front of Cologne Cathedral. The Pershing that destroyed it sits in the National Armor and Cavalry Museum. The footage Jim Bates filmed that day still exists. 45 seconds that changed how America understood armored warfare. But the real story was never about tanks. It was about men who went to war and killed because they were ordered to, and spent the rest of their lives trying to make peace with what they had done. Every March 6th since 2013, yellow roses have appeared on Katharina Esser's grave in Cologne. Someone remembers. Someone still apologizes. The guns fell silent in 1945, but forgiveness took 68 years to find. From a quiet kid who never wanted to fight, to one of the deadliest tank gunners in the European theater. From a weapon that arrived too late to save thousands, to a duel that proved everything American tankers had died waiting for. From guilt that lasted 7 decades, to forgiveness found at a grave in Cologne. Clarence Smoyer's story reminds us that war does not end when the shooting stops. The real battles, the ones fought inside the minds of those who survive, continue for lifetimes. And sometimes, if we are fortunate, they end with 2 old enemies holding each other up while laying flowers for a woman neither meant to kill. If you know someone who served and never talked about it, perhaps now you understand why. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. These people deserve to be remembered, and you just helped make sure they will be. Because that is what yellow roses mean. Someone still cares. Someone still remembers, even after everyone else has forgotten.